It's time once again for another episode of Atlanta Legal Experts Radio, broadcasting live from the Pro Business Channel studios in Atlanta. And now here's your host, Emily-Rowell.
And I have Rich-Casanova here with me as a co-host this morning. Good morning.
Yes, good morning. New year, new show, and very exciting to have quite a gathering of subject matter experts in the studio for a great topic this morning. But very excited for another year of Atlanta Legal Experts from our PBS or PBC studios. Yeah, that's the other guys. Yeah,
the Pro Business.
Watch out,
Channel.
those guys. Yeah, Pro Business Channel studios here in Buckhead.
And I would like to first introduce my guest. We have Steve Parker. Good morning.
Hi, good morning.
Nice, bright and early here this morning, huh?
I like it. Sunshiny day.
Yeah.
And we have Joseph Shum.
Good morning.
And he is with IRC Wealth Management. And we have the one and only Randy Kessler. Yay.
Morning,
He's
Emily.
back.
Good to be back.
With KS Family Law. And we're going to be talking about divorce and your financial future. So everybody stay tuned. We do have a couple of sponsors that I need to mention. We have Peachtree Offices, which is the most important of all. If it wasn't for them, I would not be here, literally.
Right.
And they help attorneys get established all throughout Atlanta area. We have 3A Law Practice Management, helping attorneys start and build their practice. And we also have Atlanta's own John Marshall Law School. You can go to atlantalegalexperts.com and find all their information. You will also be able to see all of our guests today and all of their information as well. So, you ready to go?
I'm ready. I'm in the driver's seat. Just as a listener, I'm looking forward to this show because I know you have a couple of returning guests, but and we're ready. Let's do it.
So, let's talk divorce.
Happy New Year.
Yeah, it's the beginning of a new year. And I'm sure a lot of people are starting to, think about these things. But first, I want to start with Steve Parker. He is the team originator of Team Serve First. And he's just a guy who figured out that life is about serving others through successful relationships. So how did you kind of get started in your field?
Been in real estate for about 15 years and had no intentions on working with families going through divorce. It really came about over a series of financial crises that the economy went through back in 2007, 8, and 9, and kind of threw me into the business. Found myself in a position where I was not going to be able to pay my mortgage anymore and had to find out what a short sale was back before anybody knew what a short sale was. And an extremely trying and troubling process to get through something like that. And after I went through that process, decided that we were going to help families avoid foreclosure.
That's wonderful. Yeah. So kind of just one after another and...
Yeah, well, of course, it's good that we're not dealing with the economy in the same kind of Armageddon stature that we once were, and that short sales, I hope, are going to be a trend that do not continue. So, a conversation 3-4 years ago was going to be, what would we like to do for the future?
Right.
And as we sat at a lot of kitchen tables, a byproduct of someone losing their house or a financial crisis was the marriage was going sideways too. So it was a really smooth transition for us to kind of shift gears a little bit and make this a focus.
So you also have Joe Shum here with you, financial planner, and you've worked with him
Absolutely
in the past. And so he kind of helps you help your clients going through those difficult times.
Right.
That's correct. Yep. And for us, it was sort of a similar story. The emergence of the divorce practice at IRC Wealth was sort of by accident to begin with, and my colleagues here will probably agree with this, but unfortunately, gray divorce, they call it, is the biggest emerging demographic in the divorce event, which we call the divorce event. I hate to call it an industry, but it is in itself in a marketplace, and so gray divorce is really the emerging demo, and a lot of our clients sit in that age demographic, late 40s into late 50s, and we had some clients starting to go through divorce and asking us, how do we divide, how do we maintain our goals, and how do we, once separated, continue to build wealth over time.
Sure.
And as that emerged, and we also have a practice that that works very strongly with women, professional women. That was another area where, we were having these conversations, and through that we started to explore and felt that, our mission of wanting to teach people how to build wealth simply would best be served to also approach this specific segment, right? Because a lot of people, once divorce happens, had no idea how much or how little wealth they had.
Right.
So,
or that they weren't prepared.
They weren't prepared at all, I mean, so when the team breaks up, usually one team member gets the team around them of professionals and the other one is left sort of without any trusted advisors. And so, that was sort of how we got there. And that's how I met, Steve, actually.
So IRC Wealth, you focus on savings, debt elimination, risk management. Those seem to be the three, bottom line, the core values.
The tenets. We call them the pillars.
Okay. Yeah.
Everyone's got pillars or, something like that.
So that's definitely something that could help people, when they're going through that hard time, for sure. And I'm not going to wait any longer to introduce Randy Kessler. He's here. Obviously, he is a family lawyer, and he's here to give his 2 cents.
Well, it's more expensive than 2 cents.
A nickel?
Yeah. It's funny listening to Joe and Steve because there's some symmetry here. Us older guys, we're not that old, but we're older than a lot of people. And, Joe said it sort of happenstance, and Steve sort of got dragged into the divorce process. And it's how people going through a divorce also get into it. Nobody plans on practicing divorce, and nobody plans on getting a divorce. And, our parents' generation, our grandparents' generation, there wasn't really a lot of divorce. And it's an evolving field. So it's still a newer process. And because nobody is used to it, and there's not all this historical, mechanisms for dealing with, foreclosures and finance, the result is you're turning out and yielding specialists like Steve and Joe who now have a practice that's in that. I teach a law school course, and it's surprising. Now, finally, students actually are graduating law school saying, I want to be a family lawyer. Maybe their parents got divorced or they went through one. But, when I was in law school and when you guys were, in school, nobody came out saying, we want to do divorce work. That was sort of shunned and you didn't want to do it. But, people recognize it's part of life. It's part of society. It's part of something that could happen. And we're all here to talk about preparing for it. If you're prepared, you come out better. If you're not prepared, you get dragged into it kicking and screaming. And by the time you figure out how to deal with it, it's over. So, it could happen, and there's nothing wrong with being prepared. And if it never happens, then so you learned a little bit.
Yep.
And making the best out of a bad situation. So how did you get started, Randy, if you wouldn't mind giving a little history?
I got dragged kicking and screaming. I was out of law school. I'd been out for about 3 years. I'd worked for some firms, and I did some of their divorce work and other litigation, and I started my own firm. And for about 2 or 3 years, I started realizing that people were coming to me for 2 reasons, either because I was young and hungry and I would take anything, or because I was good at family law. And the more that people came to me and said, I hear you're good at this, I like that kind of work. I like people coming to me because they thought I could do something for them. And also, it's not really an immediate gratification field. Nobody comes and says, that was a great divorce, give me another one. but we see people a few years later, and I know that I was there with them when, and if I can make their life a little bit better and have that little reserve of, I know a few years later I'll see them at the mall and they'll be doing better. And it just sort of felt good to help people, and people that were older than me, smarter than me, wealthier than me, but had not been through a divorce, and I had been through 100 a year as a lawyer.
Right.
It sort of felt good, and I like it. So I'm lucky to have found something that I like doing.
Yeah. So I would love to start for all of our listeners. Let's start with the real estate aspect of it.
Sure.
Divorce and the house.
Right.
Tell me about that.
If I can back up a little bit here too, and kind of in thought process here with what Randy's talking about, I think that with everybody here in the room, we're experts in now what, right? I've found myself in this divorce. Now what? Now what am I going to do? I think priority number 1, if they have children, would be the kids. Priority number 2 is the money, the house. Where am I going to live? We're not nomadic people. We don't live in tents anymore. So we're going to have to find a place to live. If I'm leaving, there's one outcome you can plan on in a divorce, and it's 2 addresses. So what that's going to look like for me, whether or not they're both on the mortgage. We talk about it's much more than just unfortunate circumstances of having to put a real estate sign in the front yard. That's not what we want to do. If we can work with them on the front end to where we can talk with them about, can you refinance this property? If you're not able to refinance this property, are you going to need to get a loan modification through your lender? So just be one spoke in that wheel so that they can talk about, what is my housing going to look like moving forward? Do I need to refinance one of you off of the mortgage so that I can perhaps get some equity, if there's any equity there to be had, to settle any type of divorce requirements in split division of assets? And of course, getting them on a track and a future where perhaps, it might be a situation where there's been a homemaker for many years. She has not had a job in a while. So let's talk about what it looks like to get you into a job market so that you can, of course, afford this house, afford a, residence as you're moving forward. So
I love it that you're not just bullying, hey, y'all are getting divorced. Oh, great. Can I sell your house? That's, you're giving them options, which is really great.
I love that title, that now what, when I was writing my book, the Divorce Protect Yourself book, that was the title. It was going to be Divorce. What do I do now? Because I was thinking, someone who's walking in Barnes & Noble, wow, what's in their mind? Divorce, what do I do now? But a lot of people say that's a mouthful. It's too many words. But that's the point. Because, we've all shopped for houses or for cars. We all know what it's like to find, a lawyer to open our business or a real estate agent. But many people have never been through a divorce, and it's not something you can sit back and say, well, I'm going to go through a divorce, so let me take 6 months and find the best real estate person or the best financial.
Right.
I mean, they're scared, they're nervous, and,
right,
hopefully they find somebody like Steve who does real estate and divorce and knows what you're going through on the divorce side as well as the real estate side. It's a scary process, and they need somebody that's good at what they do.
Yeah, you're right.
Yeah, and on top of that, it's, you're leveraging this time of the year as well. And a lot of people have maybe held off for a couple of months here going through the holiday season, right? Mm-hmm. And now they've stepped into, January 4th, 5th, and they're like, oh, now I want this to happen. And I've got all these different things out there to have to consider. Now, where do I start?
Exactly.
And going through all those documents for their house and mortgage, I'm sure you're also going to be going through, Joe, their financials, their life insurance, their whatever it is.
Right. It's a challenge because I think if we look at it from 50,000 feet, the first thing that a lot of people do is they run to the attorney, right? That's the first thing. I'm going to go get my attorney. And then they realize...
It's probably the right answer, right?
Well, it's the right answer. Well, except that a lot of lawyers will say, I can handle it all, and they don't think to call Steve or Joe. And, because clients have a total of $10,000 to spend on the whole divorce. Well, if they spend it all on me, where are they left with their real estate and their financial planning needs?
And that's really it. Yeah. The thing that we find more and more when we talk to the attorneys and the realtors and the therapists and accountants is, have you spoken to someone about the overall financial picture? Because they end up asking you, to be all those people. And all of a sudden I'm paying somebody $300, $400, $500 an hour to be my therapist. Now, if you want your attorney to be your therapist, that makes sense to a little bit. I mean, they're going to have to do some of that, but don't you want your trusted advisor to be that professional? And so we run into a lot of that too. Just we become sort of a clearinghouse for clients going through this to say, what is your consideration for an attorney? What is your consideration for, therapy, for the mental work that you're going through? Who else is involved here? Have you talked about the house? Right. And if so, what are your considerations for the house after the event has, the transaction has been completed?
Right.
So, these are things that we try to coach through, which is, build a team of people around you and become the CEO of your divorce.
I have a friend who's a divorce lawyer, divorce judge, divorced person, child of divorce, and she wrote a book called The Good Karma Divorce. And she was speaking to a room full of accountants about divorce. And she was thinking, Randy, how am I going to talk to these accountants about something touchy-feely like the good karma divorce? And then she got it, and you could see the light bulb went off. And she said, when clients start talking to their financial person, like Joe, or the real estate person like Steve, they're thinking about their future. When they talk to the lawyer, they're saying, he did this to me, he acted like this, she did that. They're embroiled in their past. So lawyers would be doing right by their clients to get them in to meet with folks like you guys, because then they're thinking about, how much money do I need to live on? How can I get through to retirement? How can I stay in this house with my kids where they've always grown up? Instead of thinking about, because what they want to talk to me about is, he's an SOB and I want you to kill him.
Yep. That's pretty much it.
And I got to get him.
What does that cost, by the way? Just this is we'll talk off the radio.
There you go. But you joke about that, but it's serious too. There's actually a bill. I don't know if you know about it. There was a bill introduced in Georgia to ban the right to purchase a gun if you're going through a divorce.
Right,
wow.
I heard that.
It probably won't pass, but maybe a spouse should be notified if a spouse purchases a gun. But it gets serious. But there's a lot of truth in that kind of humor, which is focusing on the anger is not good. Focusing on the future is really what.
Well, when you involve people in passion and at that level, they're not acting themselves quite often. And I just want to remind our listeners listening to Atlanta Legal Experts Radio with your host, Emily-Rowell, rich-casanova, producer, engineer. And a quick question for the panel, but I want to go back to an earlier point Randy mentioned about being prepared. And I know we've been talking about a lot of the now what, but what about before now what, if you will, right? And maybe start with Joseph from the financial perspective, and for each of you as well. But is there what's your philosophy or suggestions in terms of
steps to take?
Yeah, in advance, is there things that you would advise? Because when you get into marriage, it's pragmatic versus the emotion, and I don't think anybody plans to go to the altar with a plan B, but maybe Randy can talk about prenuptials. Yeah. But in terms of financing and housing, do you kind of separate those funds? Do you have a contingency plan? Because there's kind of a yin and yang there, right? It's like you don't anticipate going down this path, but is there things that you can do to avoid the now what, or circumvent that somewhat?
Well, that's the crystal ball, isn't it? I wish,
said.
If we could figure that out, then there's a whole nother show here we got to talk about. But it's a fair question. I think that especially when you're young, it's about love and excitement and passion, and people don't consider those things because you really, in many cases, you don't have those things. Right. You don't have wealth.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
Your career's new. You're willing to pack up the suitcases and go to a city together and do something and buy a house. And it's just a more altruistic vision depending on where you are in the age demographic.
So it's more maybe a second or third marriage, or maybe a later in life marriage where you do have some assets that you want to.
Then the considerations become more important, and, not to profess anything specifically legally and all that other stuff, but, I think that, the return on divorce for the second marriage is even higher. You're at 60%. Likelihood of getting divorced. So I think in those cases, people become much more cautious about what's theirs and what's the other party's when they're going in. So I think things like, I don't want to get into Randy's game here, but prenuptials become a consideration. Trusts to protect the children from the parents.
And a blended family. So
yes, blended families. You have to consider what you want for your kids, their kids, any blended kids.
Right.
And these all can be handled by a variety of instruments that can protect you. But I think, again, when you're moving into a marriage with those kinds of considerations, then you get with your family law attorney, you get with your accountant, you get with a business attorney, someone who can help draw up the various instruments like the various trusts. And there are lots of different trusts out there that deal with real estate and other financial assets.
Well, I definitely want to hear Randy's perspective on this, but first with Steve from the real estate perspective. So, couple older or later in life couple or second marriage purchasing a home. Have you seen a history where they kind of keep it, combined on the same title or separate, or?
Yeah, well, if it's bought jointly, I think that the decision with the house. Many times we'll see one side has just, they're dug in with the nails deep, I'm going to keep this place, right. Which is fine. I mean, that's certainly not a problem. We understand that kind of mindset. However, it just seems to be in talking with so many of the experts in the industry and the hundreds of conversations and cases that they've seen, the overwhelming majority of the time, if we were able to have them think clearly enough, perhaps, it would be, let's talk about a reset button, right? I mean, seriously, the marriage is going to take a reset, so why not have a financial reset? Okay. How about a lifestyle change here, perhaps a little bit? Maybe you want to go back home with mom or dad. Maybe you're going to take a job in another part of the country, kind of reinvent yourself. Just get out of that house. Okay?
Because the history with it, maybe sell that, divest yourself of that, and maybe downsize. Each person get a smaller property or
your income has been cut in half.
Right.
And your expenses have now doubled.
Right.
Exactly.
All right.
Exactly
So downsize
right.
is a very, very good word.
Okay.
You know, when Rich started off saying that nobody really, or whether it was Joe saying nobody really said maybe this isn't forever. I mean, I've never met with a client who said, well, when I was getting married, I thought maybe this isn't the one. Everyone, it's sad
Right,
because
only in the movies, right? You hear that, yeah.
Everyone that sits in my office thinks, I mean, it's not just a disaster because they're getting divorced. It's a personal disaster.
Yeah.
I made a wrong choice. I have
Failure.
to admit that I said to my family, to my loved one, to God that I'm going to stay with this person forever. And now I'm changing my mind. It's an embarrassment. So,
Right.
It's hard they're wrapping their heads around that. And they got to leave time to wrap their heads around their financial future, their real estate future, their kids' future. And that's what makes it really hard. And, I saw you struggling with the words, Rich. I think it's head versus heart.
Yeah.
Do you go for it?
Right.
If we all thought with our heads, I wouldn't make any money, and that'd be fine. If people said it's just a financial investment, I'm going to decide on a prenup and we're going to decide like this, then it's a piece of cake. But the problem is somebody wants to get married so bad that they rush into it without getting a prenup, or the other side's so offended by the term prenup that they think, you know what? I love him enough. We're never going to get divorced. And who would get a prenup if they thought that they might not ever, if you're not going to get divorced, if you get married and say this is forever,
right.
So why do you need a prenup?
There you go.
It's sort of head versus heart. Your head says, I might get a divorce because the rate is 50%. And your heart says, I'm not divorcing this guy or I wouldn't marry him.
Right.
It's just a hard concept.
Yeah. How do you bring that topic up in advance? Right.
Well, I got a whole speech on that, but there are a lot of ways. You got a best friend who went through a disaster. So because of that best friend's situation, you don't want to do that. Or your first marriage.
Right. Yeah.
Unexpectedly ended in divorce, or your family gave you a lot of money that you want to protect for your family's sake, not because you don't trust your spouse. So there's some ways.
Yeah. Okay.
And they're legitimate ways.
Right.
But like Joe said, more second, third marriages, when you've been burned, when you've acquired some wealth, when you've got, more to lose, the stakes get higher. You get married at 17. If you don't have any money and you don't have any kids, it's not that big a deal. But if you start gathering wealth, you can get a postnup. You can do good financial planning and real estate planning during a marriage. If you think your marriage isn't going so well, you don't have to get a divorce, but you can say, let's go meet with Randy or Joe or Steve and decide maybe I should title this in just my name. Maybe I should rent instead of owning. There's some things you can do to plan ahead. And they're not devious. They're not bad. You're just being smart, thinking just in case. You never get divorced, then you're sharing all the property anyway.
So the next book sounds like prenups are not just for celebrities anymore, right?
That is definitely true. That's true. Yeah.
That's good.
Right. So I also want to go back to an earlier point you mentioned about the distinction our parents and grandparents, that this was not, I think Joseph, you mentioned, we don't call it an industry, but it's kind of become that, the specialty needs for these services, right?
Correct.
So Randy and others on the panel, what do you attribute this distinction of? What key indicators are factors come into play that I see parents, grandparents, aunts and uncles married 50 plus years.
Why do people get divorced?
Okay, that's an easier way to ask that question.
You want to know how to predict?
No, but the difference between generation divorce, right?
Yeah, well, I think it's, people like to say because there's no fault divorce that people are getting divorced, it's a lot easier to get a divorce. And I think that's sort of ridiculous. I think, they tried to pass a bill a few years ago saying that you had to have a waiting period in Georgia before you could get divorced, like we have in South Carolina and North Carolina. And from a divorce lawyer's perspective, it's ridiculous because if someone came in to see me and they said, I'm thinking about a divorce, what are the rules? And I said, well, once you file, you have to wait 6 months before you can get a divorce. A lot of people would say, well, then let's get the clock started. And if I said, well, you know what, there's no waiting period, you can get divorced whenever you want, they might say, well, let me work on it a little bit longer. Yeah. So it's sort of counterintuitive. There are a lot of things that don't play out the way, you're going to make someone stay married because you believe in marriage. Well, why are we imposing our beliefs on other people? If you want to stay divorced or stay married, it should be up to you. So it's different. But, you made me think of something else that it just slipped my mind a second ago. Oh, how do you predict a divorce? How do you know if you're going to get a divorce? Ask somebody who's objective. Ask somebody, if you go to your best friend and say, let me tell you what's going on, they can see it very clearly because they're not involved in it. They can say, Rich, that's really going on. You've got issues. Or Rich, that's not an issue. Someone, you can tell when your best friend's got problems.
Or clergy or a
therapist.
A therapist, somebody at counsel. Right.
Yeah.
A lot of times you don't see it. And
that's exactly
everybody else
that's
sees it. And then when you're actually open to asking, they're like,
people that care about you.
Sorry, but I've seen it for a while.
And then that whole deer in the headlights mentality is stuck with they're not they don't seem to click. It doesn't seem to, yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So they don't know what they don't know.
One of my favorite cartoons, I saw a guy was standing out in the outfield in a baseball stadium with his glove, and there were some papers in the glove, and it said, "This just came out of left field."
That's funny.
So,
well, and I think too that we always like to coach people to get through the event, right? And get moving on with carrying on their life, right? And making the changes necessary to have a better second half, so to speak. And so, when we get a lot of people that come to us and say, well, I'm not sure, or, I'm thinking about working on it. We want them to work on it. We're not like looking for the event to happen so we can, go get your money and start managing it, right? We want to push them to, consider a professional therapist that can help coach them through their thoughts and their challenges and things like that. And if they can rescue it, they are stronger together financially.
Or even if there's not that outcome of saving their marriage, but it's a better outcome overall. And that would be interesting maybe on a future episode to incorporate a therapist, maybe some of y'all that you might suggest or recommend. But kind of at our midway point here, we got lots of questions still on the docket here, but I just want to once again remind our listeners, maybe we'll mention our sponsors here as well, but you're listening to Atlanta Legal Experts radio show with your host, Emily-Rowell. And before we get into our next segment, let's go around the table real quick, if you would, and just let our listeners know the best way to reach each of you and your point of contact, website, phone number, social security number, PIN number to your credit card, whatever you want to give out, home address, vacation home address if it's available. Yeah. All right. So,
it's Joe Shum at IRC Wealth. We're at ircwealth.com, and you can also find us on LinkedIn, and we're on Twitter and Facebook. So we're everywhere on social media. Come see us.
All under the name IRC.
IRC Wealth. Yep.
And that stands for?
Well, it's part of.
I didn't know whether that was a trick question. Yeah.
No, it's part of another company we have called Investors Research Corporation. The SEC makes us separate things.
Okay, so, nice. Yeah. Those dang SEC people.
Yeah. Compliance. Don't let that get in the way.
All right.
Yeah, and Stephen Parker with Team Serve First at Keller Williams. You can find us on Facebook or teamservefirst.com. Instagram, LinkedIn, pretty much just about any one of those networks. Feel free to pick up the phone. You can reach us directly at 678-776-0628 as well. Call us and tell us your story.
Perfect.
Me?
Yes, Randy. RK.
It's KS Family Law, and if you ask me what it stands for, you're going to have to pronounce Solomon. But you can find us at divorceprotect.com. That's the book we wrote on how to protect yourself and your kids and your future, divorceprotect.com. We're on LinkedIn. We're on Twitter. And our website, KS Family Law, has a lot of great information. If you never use us, you don't need us, great. But pick up some information or feel free to email and say, I'm not sure I want a divorce, but I need someone in California. We'll try to help you out. But it's a tough process. Don't go through it alone.
I agree with that.
I like that.
Let's give our plug to our sponsors.
Yes, we have Peachtree Offices at peachtreeoffices.com, helping attorneys establish their firm in Atlanta. And we have 3A Law Practice Management at 3alawmanagement.com, helping attorneys start and grow their practice, and Atlanta's own John Marshall Law School. And I believe that's jmls.org. And you can see all the links to their websites on AtlantaLegalExperts.com. I've done that once before.
Yeah, exactly. A couple times.
And I'm Emily-Rowell, your host.
All right. Yes, you are.
With Peachtree Offices.
All right. So, gentlemen, kind of continuing on this topic, what are some, we talked about earlier kind of with your friends and family kind of see these, the writing on the wall, so to speak. What are some kind of, red flags or indicators that there might be issues brewing that y'all have seen? Maybe start with Randy.
When you come home and your wife has taken all the furniture and everything out of the house.
Right. Change the locks on the door. Yeah.
You could be getting a divorce. Right.
All the good furniture.
Maybe Jeff Foxworthy here,
That's the redneck version of it. Yeah. You might be getting a divorce if, yeah.
When people start raising the divorce word, when they say we should just get a divorce or why don't you divorce me, you should take it seriously.
Mm-hmm.
If it's in someone's mind, they're already thinking about it. They're the obvious signs of someone cheating while they're coming home at 3:00 in the morning. They're working out. They're all of a sudden, got a new cell phone that you can't look at, change their passwords. There's some obvious things like that. But again, like I said earlier, talk your friends, the people that care about you, ask them what they think of your marriage. It's a hard question to open up to, but they're friends that love you and care about you, but they won't say a word because they don't want to interfere. They've got to get along with your spouse. But if you say, I need to know, you're my friend, what would you do if you were me? And they'll say, you should go talk to a lawyer. You should talk to a therapist. I think that's the best thing you do is ask somebody who's objective, but cares about you.
I'm sure every single case is completely different.
100%.
So there's not one.
Which is what I love about what I do.
Really cookie cutter, yeah.
They're all different. There's not a one size fits all. It's like a jigsaw puzzle that comes into my office, and they're all going to get put together somehow or another, but they're going to all look different. And you need some experts like these guys.
So if they're making that 3 a.m. call to Jake at State Farm, but it's not Jake at State Farm,
that's funny.
It might be a problem.
A conversation there is just going to be between the two of them. Hey, listen, I'm kind of feeling a little something here. Can we have a conversation?
Mm-hmm. And hope they're honest.
Exactly. Hope they're honest. Should we have some counseling? Go to the church or synagogue, place of worship, and ask for a third party opinion to kind of come in here and get involved for 6, 7, 8, 10 sessions, whatever that takes, if we're going to try and work this out. Because I feel like something's just not right here.
It's funny. Sorry, Joe.
No, I was going to say, and we sort of, we all know this, but, money becomes a real cause of divorce in many cases. And so if we back off a little bit and think, is money the primary reason why we're not gelling as a team? Because we know that a team does better financially over time, right? They can assemble wealth and a happier, more comfortable, stress-free lifestyle working together. Then maybe it's time to look at why is the money thing such a challenge for us? And maybe they look for a coach on the money thoughts, right? And there are all kinds of different ways you can do that. You can come to, it's not just about investing. That's a tool. It's a tactic, but how do I view money? And what do I want out of life, right? We talk to people about what are the goals you want? Where do you want to take this? And there are actually specialists out there now on the therapy side of things that just coach for money. They actually have a designation now where they are money therapists. And I suggest looking into that because a lot of times that alleviates a lot of pressure in the situation. You can avoid this whole thing.
Well, that's a great point. That follows up on Steve's point earlier about two households. Look, people don't get divorced to get rich. People always say, I'm going to get, they're getting divorced for the money. She's divorcing him for, you don't have more money when you get divorced. You have twice as many expenses with the same exact income and assets. Yeah. So you're right. If you can figure out how to do it together financially, you're going to be better off. But, one thing I want to say, and it's nice to follow up on Steve's comment, how get to therapists, get to somebody. Everyone in this room, I think, would rather that every person they meet stays married. Right. I mean, all things being equal, we all want them to stay married. We'll make money another way. I mean, none of us are going to, lose our jobs because nobody ever gets divorced. It's going to happen, but I feel better, and I know these guys feel better, if someone has done everything they can to stay married and the divorce is the last option. If they're going to have to go through it, we'll help them. I mean, nobody here is saying go out and get a divorce so we can make money. We're going to make money. We're going to be okay.
Thank you for making that point. I like that.
It's true.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. My husband gets worried every time I have these shows.
Right. Especially the first time Randy was on the show.
Send me the link, right? Send me the link on that.
Yeah. You were asking a little too many questions there.
I remember first time, like you said, you had Randy on the show, and then you had his book just casually set on the coffee table at home. That would kind of maybe one of those indicators.
He was great that week.
Did you get roses?
He was great. Yeah,
that's true, right? Yeah, that's the other take on it. Yeah,
it's wonderful.
Yeah,
your book works both ways.
It's more of a rut row moment. Yeah, I better get my act together. Yeah,
it's going to put me out of business.
Yeah. There's we haven't talked about alternates to going down this path, but I guess kind of maybe sometimes there's a separation or kind of the heart grows fonder kind of thing, right? I mean, Randy, have you had experiences where people come in and they're very heated, very passionate? And another kind of a piggyback question is, typically what's a gestation, time look like typically?
Oh goodness. I think it's all over the map. Some people, are definitely ready. Some people come in and they just do a checkup, Come in and say, just
hypothetically ready. Yeah.
And more about custody. I want to make sure if I get divorced, I'll still have a relationship with my kids. What can I do? And, but it's all over the map. And I'll tell you, people always say, do you try to talk them out of divorce? And it's sort of, my instant reaction is no. I mean,
it's not your role.
Right. And I think it takes so much, energy and gumption and courage to come into a divorce lawyer's office that for me to sit there and say, are you sure you really want this, is sort of offensive. I don't push them into it. And I say to almost every client, look, I won't feel good if you get divorced and say, well, I wasn't really ready, but you told me I had to file now. So I tell them all, or I try to tell them all, you got to know when it's ready for you. But if and when you're ready, or if your spouse decides for you, here are the steps. And I think, we've got to all reconcile our conscience that we're only doing this because they want it. But, like you said earlier, Joe, they've got, therapists that are a lot cheaper than their lawyers.
Right.
They should have a good therapist if they're really just talking it through. Our job is to say, if you get a divorce, given your assets and your conduct and your situation, here's what I think a judge might do. And people also ask me all the time, what's fair? What's reasonable? And I say, I could decide what's fair for me, but really the only thing I can do for you is to tell you, if you and your spouse can't figure out what to do, here's what I think this judge in this situation will likely do. And I'm not telling you that's fair, but that's the barometer. Figure it out yourselves, because if not, this judge who's got 1,000 cases a year to figure out is going to not really have the time or patience or energy to figure out and understand everything about your life. Try to figure it out yourself. And that's something that, I think a lot of people don't think. They think judges are so wise and so perfect that they'll see how bad the other side is. And it doesn't always happen the way they think it's going to happen.
Those are definitely true words. And in certain counties, there are family law judges, and then they're dealing with just these kinds of transactions. But what if you're in a smaller county and he's got, 3 murder cases and a couple of robbery cases behind you, and here's 2 people that aren't getting along, and they're trying to figure out how to divide up the checking and savings accounts. They're going to be mad. They're going to be very sort of nonchalant about it. Get out of my way.
Even where there's a family court in Fulton County, some judges grew up with certain baggage. Some judges grew up in different socioeconomic backgrounds. Some judges say, you want $20,000 a month? No way could I, which might be appropriate for the case, but that judge can't relate to that. And another judge might say, $100 a month, that's not nearly enough. So, you're going to throw your lot in life to somebody who you don't really know anything about their background. It's a terrible mistake. If you can solve it yourself, do everything you can.
I totally agree with that.
It's something I kind of envy the guys that are here with me here this morning, and the method which you guys are going to approach this. Most of the time, you're just working with one side of the equation. Right. It's him or her. Well, when we get involved, we got to get into the house, and we have to get both parties to agree to what's fair. That's what got me thinking on that mind track.
That's a good point.
And I'm there, and I see all the dirty laundry. Literally, because it's right there in the hamper. They haven't done it in a month, or something, situation like that. And I've got to try to keep one of the 2 parties from jabbing the pen in the other one's neck. Contentious things, or I really don't want to be here. And
do you bring your own lawyer?
Right. There's no win-win. I mean, every dollar that goes to one side is a dollar the other side doesn't get.
One side's thinking they're going to get taken advantage of.
Especially when they ask you what's it worth, and they're waiting for an answer right there.
What's it worth? And then, of course, the process of the whole negotiation is they are going to be the best representation for me here in this transaction. Are they looking out for my best interest or the other side's best interest? So it's really a juggling act, if you will, or maybe an acquired talent that you're able to make sure that both sides are we represent the house, perhaps, type of terminology.
I bet you have times when your clients go to an independent person who says to them, look, Steve's doing a great job. You don't need a separate person. It's going to be twice the work and half the money. But sometimes I bet a second opinion would probably be a good reflection on you.
Well, thank you. And another thing on that too, as well, is, we don't get paid unless we do a great job. So it's on the tail end and the back end of that type of thing. And, the last thing that I would like or want anyone to feel is that they weren't given great service or a fair outcome in this whole type of thing. So, those type of conversations happen a lot, even from the appraisal side.
And you can't control the sales price.
And I can't control the sales price. The appraisal comes in. If we need to do some things on the front end, provide those services for free, we're willing to do that. The appraisal comes in and it's not right, then let's talk about it. Okay. Let's put some things together so that, again, everybody does feel like there's something fair and amicable happening. That's the middle ground that either side's trying to find anyway.
What's interesting? That's very similar to our practice in that you find, people are always unhappy after divorce. It's not a happy time. There's something to be unhappy about. But what I find with lawyers in general is that people are not as concerned with the outcome as with the effort.
There you go.
If I do everything I can to put their case in front of a judge or get them what they want, and the judge doesn't go their way, the jury doesn't go their way, I think most clients are more okay with that than if I just phone it in, show up, don't really know the facts, and they get a great result. They might be happy with the result, but my job is to give them the best chance of getting what they want. And, the rest is up to fate or the judge or them or the facts,
That's exactly right.
I like the way that all of you are really representing the person and all their choices. And for you, Steve, both sides, which sounds scary. I know.
Yeah, the house is a really emotional thing.
Absolutely.
It's very emotional.
Absolutely.
Steve and I both sit on the board of Visions Anew, which is a nonprofit organization here in the city, and it's an education and support center for divorce. And so we frequently get into some of these seminars where we get to meet people that are considering divorce, and we chat with them. And, the house comes up within the first, 10 nanoseconds of every conversation. I'm getting it, or he's getting it, or she's getting it. And I want my kids to have a stable environment, and as if the kids are this whole thing's going to pass them by if they just get to stay in the house.
Right. Home is where the heart is.
Yeah. And so, I don't envy the conversations that Steve has, that are on the deck right there in the home, but there are a lot of different ways to look at it. And I think people have to get back to 50,000 feet and look at the house as it's a house.
Well,
right.
And it's a lot worse now. 30 years ago when I started practicing, that was the big asset. When you buy a house, it goes up. Now it's, no, you take the house. No, you take, because
they're both giving it away.
We see people, and you've all seen this, where someone will say, I'll take the house as long as you will contribute to the debt. When we sell the house for a loss,
right,
we're going to, it used to be we sell the house and we'll split the profit. Now it's we sell the house and we got to split the loss.
It's liability.
The economy's coming back, thank goodness. But
Now, I have a question I want to get focused on for the listeners that are thinking of or just really into this conversation. They're thinking about their kids. And we mentioned it earlier that, we want to do what's best for the kids. Can you we'll start with Joe and just kind of go around the table. Can you give some advice on how to protect the kids? This is a result of the divorce. What are they going through? It's terrible for them. So can you?
Yeah, I think that, I'm not a therapist, although I would say that I would be including them in a lot of the conversations so they understand what the entire family is going through. So because there's a lot of cards on the table to be played, and I think they should be kept abreast of it, especially if they're older children, whether they're going through college and they're thinking, oh my God, how are mom and dad going to be able to pay for my tuition?
From the money perspective, child support or not inheritance, but how's that going to?
And how do you handle that?
Inheritance is also an issue. What if the kids are inheriting from grandpa?
Right. On the other side of the family.
Right. And there stands to be an inheritance there, but mom and dad who are in between grandpa are getting divorced, right? And
that's
who gets
an interesting
that money? Right.
Perspective, because if it's the husband or wife, and now these families are now become the Hatfields and McCoys, right? They're not talking to each other, and they're not getting this spouse. The other side's not getting any of the money, and that writes off the kids.
Yes, it can be. Or, if you're trying to protect the children's interests, from their own parents in some respects, because they're heated, they're in emotional situations, they're looking at all these different assets on the table. And I always like to, think the best of everybody as parents, right? They want to protect their kids, but, things get in the way.
And along that vein, in terms of trust and wills, is that set in stone in advance? Once that it's been signed.
Well,
I guess that's more of a legal question.
Well, here's what's interesting. I was thinking about answering the question my way, which is, how do you solve a case, and minimize the impact on the kids? Well, of course, you tell them it's not their fault, and you keep them out of it. And the judge made a decision, and mommy and I still love you, and we still care about each other because we have kids. But from the financial side, aside from, protecting the kids can actually be a byproduct if it's not your first goal. In other words, if I've got $1 million and my wife and I are going to get divorced and I don't want her to get $500,000, I can say, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to go to Joe and I'm going to put $250,000 away for my kids. Oh. And then there's only $750,000 to divide. So I've kept my wife from getting half of the million.
Right.
And I've protected my kids. Is that a bad thing? My wife should be happy because now she doesn't have to save as much. There are ways you can financially plan if a divorce may be 6 months out or 2 years out without hurting anybody. Giving money to kids. There are a lot of ways to do it creatively. And that's what you're talking about, Rich, with set up a trust, set up a college fund, set up a 529.
Right.
No one's going to object. in a bad marriage or a good marriage, they should have little objection to putting money away for the kids.
It's a great approach. And the trust thing is becoming more and more popular. Trusts always used to be considerations of the wealthy, right? But the wealthy knew something, right? They knew that these things had a great advantage. And now the idea of trusts and such are working their way down the financial food chain, and they're very applicable ways. And there are so many of them that you can use. And, someone who's certified and that kind of thing. It's a combination of your financial and legal people putting it together for you, but it's a great way to help the kids, perpetuate, their life.
Sure.
Well, that's a great point by Randy, but until you get into the blended family issue, I'm going to give half my $1 million to my first kid from my first marriage. Right. The current wife's not going to be on board with that. Yes or no.
That's another
no
show.
Or no.
Yeah, it depends on when you earned it. Depends on
Yeah.
But that is sort of a consideration too, right? Because are you protecting children from marriage number one from potential inheritance and distributions in marriage number two?
Protection. That's what Joe was talking about. Protection.
Asset
Pre-planning.
protection.
Prenup. You decide that before you get married. You can say, we're getting married. I have $2 million. Half of it is going to my kids from my first wife.
Period.
Yeah. And then it's on the table.
Along that thought process with the children and how that works, I think one thing that we like to do, and I think it's a really effective tool, is whether or not a place is sold and they're going to get into something else, or if there's now 2 residences, it just means the world to a young child that the house that they may be leaving, we'll come in and we'll make sure that their room looks like the room that they just left.
Oh, wow.
That's cool.
So a Buzz Lightyear and airplanes on the wall, and we got Frozen and, Tinkerbell and Pink in this room, so that,
especially for the younger kids.
For the younger
almost
kids,
all the way through
they
teenage.
do that for older folks, for assisted living places.
That's a
I
good
never
point.
thought of that.
Yeah.
But they do it the same thing for older folks that have to leave their house and go into assisted living.
Yeah.
My grandparents did that, and they made the place look and feel and smell,
right?
The house they left. So
it's an enormous thing. The kids light up, and then for a moment, kind of the background goes away for a little bit, And it's a nice to see them work like that.
Yeah, that is.
It's a cool tactic.
Yeah, will you write something about that, and we'll put it on our website?
I love it. I'd be glad to. Yeah, sure.
It's a cool tactic.
Well, I think because we're kind of getting close to time here, it would be a great idea for everybody to just kind of go around the table and just kind of summarize how they can help their next client, and then also mention how that they can be reached again.
Sure, yeah.
So I'm Joe Shum. I'm at IRC Wealth here in Atlanta. We work with clients predominantly in the region, but across the United States. And you can catch us on ircwealth.com, at IRC Wealth on Twitter. We're on LinkedIn, Facebook, and, all the other cool social media stuff. And, the closing thing for us is always build a team, right? Mm-hmm. Take your considerations for what you're trying to accomplish and look at it as objectively as possible. Remove as much emotion from this as you can and go find a team that works for you. And I encourage you to interview 3 people. It's just like I'm going to do a kitchen. Right? I want 3 contractors, 3 quotes for your attorney, your financial expert, your realtor, your therapist. Go, because this is in a sense another kind of marriage, and they have to be on the same sort of mental plane as you as to what you're trying to accomplish. So that's our big thing always, is build your team and then become the CEO of it. Because at the end of the day, it's your decision. Like Randy had said earlier, we're not here to tell you what to do. We offer up options, and then ultimately it's your decision.
And that those team members can kind of be mediators in a sense of they're kind of can be separated from that raw emotion or whatever, right?
Mm-hmm.
And
no
kind
question.
of can think a lot clearer
and introduce the team members to each other, right? I mean, you want them to get along.
Yeah, that's a topic I was going to bring up earlier. We unfortunately don't have time, but that was the thought process I had, is like, if you have these 2 attorneys or 2 realtors kind of, and they're obviously speaking on behalf of one spouse versus the other. I mean, that's a whole nother
we'll
almost show. Yeah,
it's a reality show.
Yeah, it's a reality show. Yeah,
right. Yeah, I really feel that's where we're able to bring most of our value to someone like that, is we realize that we're just one spoke in this wheel. All right. I know that this team feels the same way about it. And if you can plug these folks into it to where once they do get past the emotional roller coaster and the deer in the headlights, the now what, some of the acronyms we've used here this morning, that they do need to take the approach that they're going to need to be making responsible decisions for themselves and educate themselves so that they can make those responsible decisions moving forward. That's what I think everybody in this room's about.
Can you tell me a little more about Visions Anew and just quickly summarize what that is?
Sure. Visions
and
Anew.
then how people can find it as well.
Right. No problem. I mean, it's visionsanew.org. And we are about 17 years old right now. It is a collection of everybody in the gamut. Again, all the spokes in the wheel, if you will. You can take a look at them there online. Tons of resources to read online. Weekend seminars that are very inexpensive to come and attend, and will feed you. And I tell you what, those folks, they come into the room and they really don't want to be there, right, Joe?
That's true.
So people that are just thinking about divorce,
Exactly.
and they've got a team of people there to kind of help either way.
Or if you're already in the process.
Or if you're in the
Yeah,
process.
It doesn't matter where.
So
We see them coming together. We see them coming together.
At an event like that, is it one-on-one, or these are groups of multiple couples all gathering?
That's exactly right.
So that would be an interesting perspective, is that they can kind of share shared experiences, what they're going through.
Exactly.
Amongst the couples, yeah.
Right.
Yep.
Great.
Right.
Maybe find their next mate.
And before they know,
I'm sure that could happen. There's always some looking around in the room.
Connection. Yeah, right, exactly.
No, but before long, they
Sorry.
they're really taking down more notes, and they're just, they don't know what they don't know again. So they're getting so much information by the time that they leave there that day. It's an eye opener that they have got to get more research done.
Sure. And then if you'll tell them how to reach you.
Teamservefirst.com. Call me on my cell phone, 678-776-0628.
Dangerous. So for me, I love what you guys are talking about, team approach, because it's not only do we need a team of experts in financial and real estate, but I mean, in our firm, I'm an insecure guy. So we have 13 lawyers, and
come on.
I'm telling you, that's why we've grown our firm, because I don't want to be the only lawyer that the client comes in and says, here's money. I want you to go take care of my spouse. And then I think, wow, they're paying me. I got to go do their bidding. I want to check some balance. I want to bring somebody else into my office and say, am I being over aggressive, under aggressive? So we sort of have that checks and balances, and perspective is everything. Someone might have a different perspective. I saw a cartoon once where it was a picture of a little stick figure of a guy on an island, and he sees in the distance a guy on a boat. And then there's the same picture, and it's side by side. And on one picture, the caption says boat. And on the other picture, it says land. So it depends on where you are. If you're on the boat, you're happy to find land.
Right.
If you're on the land, you're happy to see a boat. So,
Right.
but you can find us at, again, KS Family Law or divorceprotect.com. If you're just even thinking about a divorce, I think it's $16 or it's $9 on Amazon, but it's a basic sort of, should I move out of the house? How do I find a lawyer? How long does a divorce take? Do I use a judge or a jury? Do I need an old lawyer or a young lawyer? It's just the basic kind of stuff. It's like a collection of blogs about topics that are probably running through your head if you're thinking about a divorce. And by all means, if we can help you, let us know.
I love it. That wraps it up for Atlanta Legal Experts Radio. Emily Rowell with Peachtree Offices signing out.
Thank you again for joining Emily Rowell and her guests on the Pro Business Channel. Use the social media links here to share today's show and stay tuned for the next episode of Atlanta Legal Experts Radio.